Why will you want to do public-private dialogue? Not sure, but I'm going to tell you, what other people think. Because there must be something in it for you. If you're doing something, like if you're watching this video and you're watching me babble and babble with my French accent for a very long time, there is something in it for you. You're learning about something, you might use it at your work. So what's in it in the stakeholders that do public-private dialogues? Very important question. Well, let's look about the government. The government is in a race to be more competitive. The public sector wants to perform better, give better service delivery, deliver better service to the citizens, of course. That's what they're here for. We hope that's what they spend their time doing. And so it's kind of a race, and it's kind of a jump race. I don't know how you call this in English, this jumping race or something, where you have obstacle, and you have so many obstacles, and you don't know in which order they are, because should you deal about labor issues? Should you reduce red tape for companies? Is it a question of productivity? Is it because the utilities are too expensive? Are there issues of logistics, of corruption? Where do you start, So the government can really prioritize the action that they need to take when they get structured input from a balanced range of actors in the private sector. It helps them prioritize. It's great for the government. That's what's in it for them. No, the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur cares about one thing. He doesn't want to see a picture like that, the entrepreneur. Because when I have an idea as an entrepreneur, I want success fast. But often I face so many government regulations, so many government public sector systems that I have to navigate in order to get to my success. And it's very tiresome, and we lose a lot of people along the way. And of course, a lot of small, medium businesses, they die after 1 or 2 years after they're created. And sometimes it's kind of healthy that they die, because that means they were not competitive, and those people that were doing those businesses will do another business which will be more competitive and which will be more prone to succeed in the marketplace. But you don't want them to die for bad reason. You want them to die for good reasons, which is, there were too much competition or something. You want them, the last thing you want is them to catch a sickness before they actually, reach maturity. And that sickness is the red tape. Like what kind of red tape they have to face to just get that employment permit for this worker that they want to import from this other country, what kind of a fee they need to pay for so many inspections the business are getting, and sometimes they're nonsensical inspections, sometimes they're good for safety, what kind of license they need to get that in the next door country, they don't need to get that license because there is no safety risk. What kind of, the way they have to pay their taxes is sometimes very uber complicated, and so that's not what the entrepreneurs want to see. The entrepreneurs want to see a nice, straight path from the idea to the success, and the public-private dialogue can help doing that because it can help reduce red tapes by having the view of the private sector saying, guys, makes no sense this regulation you have here in the government. If we do it like this, maybe you'll get the same thing, but we will be able to go much faster to our success. And of course, that translates into regulatory payoff, because here's an example from Ghana, drop in number of days that it takes for goods to clear customs from 15 to 5 days, because there were cost-saving, efficiencies, productivity improvement that were figured out not just by the custom official thinking, but by the custom official thinking with input from the private sector and working on the compromise together. Plenty of regulatory payoff. This is really the classical thing you can get with a public-private dialogue, our regulatory payoff. In Bosnia, I was talking to you about this example before, reducing the amount of capital you need to start the business from $6,500 to a bit more than $1,000. In Vietnam, facilitating the way you can employ expatriate workers. Sometimes it's about changing an entire law. And in Turkey, for instance, where you had the YOIK, which are the Turkish initial for a very long name, which is like the committee for business improvement of the business environment or something like this. They had a new law on company registration, which was fully brokered through public-private dialogue that tremendously reduced the amount of steps it takes for a company to register. It went from like 19 steps to 1 step to register a business. Sometimes it's about setting new institutions altogether. For instance, in Botswana, they had a program where the entrepreneurs felt they were not fully well represented, and it was very hard to get sometimes public financing for support for specific kind of businesses. They actually created the Citizen Entrepreneur Development Agency through this public-private dialogue brokerage. I want to talk to you about another reason why people might want to engage in public-private dialogue, and these are some businesses that come to invest in particular communities, and they want to manage the risk that they have in investing in those communities. Typical examples are mining companies, for instance. They get into a place, and in this slide, I picture, those people coming in, but they come into a community. They come into an existing ecosystem where you have people, you have infrastructure, you have employment or unemployment, you have things that works and don't, you have health service or you might not have health services. And they come and they somewhat, can create a disruption in there by putting a big mining company, a big mining field, or they're going to put a big paper mill somewhere, and what kind of pollution they're going to create. And but they're also a big brand when they arrive. And they're a big economic actor. They're a major player. So a lot of people see them as a superhero that comes in and say, oh, because Coca-Cola came in the middle of nowhere here and put this big factory, they're going to do good things for the communities that are around. And they should do good things because they should, help on water improvements and on waste management and on road constructions and so on. And so the major players there that are at the center are feeling, well, what should we do? Where should we invest? So often the process for those companies is to go around in the communities and find out what are the community improvement projects that are the most needed to mitigate the risk that they cause by being there. Either because they created displacement of people by getting some land concession, either because they're going to have trucks coming in and out, and so they're going to have to, build roads and maintain some things and maybe give infrastructure to some communities which have been affected the most by the presence of those roads. Either because they're here and they're going to employ a vast number of people, and so they need to create some health services or some schools in some villages around there. And for them, those companies, it's a question of really managing the risk because they're coming somewhat as a disruptor in that community to do something that's going to be good for the community eventually and good for the country. They're going to bring more taxes, more revenues, more employment, but they also have a disruption, and so it's very easy for people to actually be unhappy. And if you look at this picture I draw here, we have the company in the middle, and they're asking like 100 people. They eventually select like 100 potential projects that they could do, and they have a lot of demand. People come to them, please do this, please do that. So which one should I do? Well, eventually they select a few, and they go to those few places because they select maybe 100, but out of that they have to do maybe 10. And so the question is, when they select only a few, it angers the others. And the other people are saying, what? You didn't put electricity back to my village. You put a school in that village. You did this water cleanup plant in this water basin, but not in our water basin. And we still have, the water that comes here and that can be polluted. And so very quickly, it's a problem for those companies that wanted to come and invest in there to resist to that pressure that they have around there. And so before you know it, everybody is up there and everybody's revolting against this bad company that came to maybe rip the country of its richness that you had in the soil or in its water or something like this, and people are unhappy and it's difficult for the company. This a scenario I'm giving you here. It doesn't happen in all cases. I'm doing a lot of caricature, of course, but it happened in some cases. So I want to talk to you about a different scenario where public-private dialogue might be useful here, and that's how those people are using it and what's in it for them. Consider again that big major player that comes and that wants to manage the risk in the middle of that environment and that big community. Well, they arrive in an ecosystem made of education and skills, made of a certain number of regulation, tax, land, trade, the way trade is done, the way entrepreneurship, innovation, technology is used or not to develop the field where they are. The infrastructure has a certain quality, a certain quantity of infrastructure. People have access to finance or not. There is a banking network, there is no banking services around. So there is a certain ecosystem in which you arrive. And when you arrive as a big company in there, people might think that you're suddenly expected to solve everything, but you can't. So as a big company, what some people do, they leverage their brand to convene all the actors and say, can we create a network of actors from all those communities around to discuss those fundamental issues that are undermining the development of the areas where we come in, as opposed to come in and spend a few dollars here and there to try to do a few projects. Can we organize a wider discussion about the underlying elements that are impeding on the environment where we are, whether it's the quality of the environment, whether it's the quality of the economic development, the competitiveness of the area. And so what they can do, they can set up a mechanism. They can themselves sponsoring because they're a big brand, so they can bring the smaller people. For instance, in the mining industry, you can bring the smaller mining companies both to improve local content into the mining industry, but also to bring in other people from the Ministry of Education, from the schools, from the health services, because all those people are part of the ecosystem. And if you do this kind of mechanism, then what does a company do? The company that is sponsoring that, they went from mitigating risk by solving a few issues to sponsoring a discovery process for solving the underlying factors to issues faced by all stakeholders. They went from playing politics to try to be here and get the right permits and then try to mitigate this and that risk by influencing, using politicians to solve some of the issues. They went from playing politics to trying to influence on policies. And they went to focus on a few public officials, private sector, supply chain people, just lobbying or working just a few people here to provide local content. They went to a true public-private dialogue with multi-stakeholder engagement that's going to enable them to discover many more partners. And you can do that by structuring it on working on innovation technology, access to finance, infrastructure, regulation, trade, and so on, education, skills, and development, or you can structure it in any way that is best suited for the place and what are the underlying factors that are a problem in that place. But this is also what's in it for me when I'm a big company, I'm a major player, and I'm going to a new space and I'm creating some disruption. What's in it for me in creating a public-private dialogue? I can move from my lobbying and mitigating a few risks to actually sponsoring a true discovery process that's going to really help. And my brand will be higher for that reason. And the issues I wanted to solve at the beginning, it's going to be much more mitigated through that. So we see some of that in the market. What's in it for me? Well, from the point of view of the reformer, you want good reforms to happen. And what's a good reform? I want you to look at this framework here, which is 3 bubbles on the left. And you can say that these 3 bubbles, was at the intersection of it, is a good reform. So what's a good reform? And this slide was come from the World Development Report 2005 on improving the investment climate, by the way. A good reform is something that you want to do because it's good, right? You learned about good practice. You have you have policy desirability. Like you want to do it because it's a good thing to do for this environment, for this country, for this sector. Now, you also need to have the political will. You need to make sure that politically people want to do it, because maybe it's a good thing that people want to do, but there is no real political will to take this reform and go through, the enactment in the parliament and then actually do it. And also, even if you had the political will and it was something you wanted to do, maybe you don't have the administrative feasibility because you don't have the possibility or the capacity of the public officials to actually carry out that reform. They are not equipped, they don't have the skills, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the money, they don't have the infrastructure to do it. And so a good reform is only what's at the intersection of all those points. In this slide is the letter A at the beginning, on the left, sorry. So what's in it for the reformer to do public-private dialogue? What's in it is you can expand the space of A. You can expand the reform space because the public-private dialogue enable you to learn about good practice and have a desirability that's good it's desired both by the public sector and the private sector, and you find more things you can do together. On the administrative side, you can do capacity building and you can have involvement of the private sector into technical working groups to help the public sector devise the reform and implement it. And on political feasibility, you have this high-level brokerage that can be done by bringing a balanced range of actors and do reform management through the public-private dialogue that becomes a true discovery process and that really expands the space for reform. And this is a huge benefit for the reform process. And every politician will tell you they're trying to improve the reform process in their country. Well, what's in it for them? Public-private dialogue, that's what they can do with it, expand the reform space in their country through the setup of a discovery institution, which is the public-private mechanism that you put in there. The discovery institution is going to push the boundary of that, and that's their job, and that's what they can do.